Good afternoon, and thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. This is your host, Patricia Houston, and I just want to remind everybody that this Lunch and Learn is brought to you by family partners of Morris in Sussex counties. And today, in this amazing, powerful, and educational Lunch and Learn, is joining us Carrie Parmelee. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you, Patricia. Hi, everybody.
Thank you for being here with us.
Do you want me to tell a little bit about myself?
Of course, Carrie. I just want to say something before we continue with your introduction.
Sure, please.
Carrie is the coordinator / family support specialist and is here from the Intensive Family Support Services, IFSS, Sussex Mental Health Association. And now, Carrie, would you please go over about yourself or anything that you would like to share with us?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. As Patricia said, I'm from the Mental Health Association, and I am the coordinator of Intensive Family Support Services. I'm a social worker with a master's degree and a license in social work. And I've been in the field of mental health for, I don't even want to tell you, 30 years. And I've been working specifically with families for over 20 years. I'm also a caregiver to my mother who has bipolar disorder. So I am a mental health caregiver in my personal life. She's in counseling and she takes medication and she lives in assisted living in Florida. And she's doing pretty well at the moment. So, but I'm here to talk to you about the programs and talk about mental health in general. So that's a little bit about me, and I could tell you about the programs whenever you're ready, but I wonder if you have any questions, Patricia?
Definitely, and I just want to thank you once again for being here and doing this Lunch and Learn for us and our community. So, Carrie, tell us a little bit about what is IFSS, Sussex Mental Health Association.
Okay, so Intensive Family Support Services is pretty similar to what Family Partners does for families with children, in that we support and educate the caregivers whose loved ones are having a mental health condition or emotional problem or challenge. And we do that for families whose loved ones are over 18. So we kind of complement family partners in that way. We provide those family members who are caregivers psychoeducation and family consultations, which is individual counseling for any caregiver. And we also do family support groups, which we have every week in the evening, and we have twice monthly during the day. And we also teach through the psychoeducation, we'll teach advocacy skills, and we'll teach communication skills and problem solving, coping strategies, and just assess the family's need. We are 100% grant funded, so the families do not have to pay any cost for the program. The Division of Mental Health and Addiction Services funds that to any family. And so a lot of what we do weekly is support groups, daily is individual sessions, or referral and service linkage to help families get their care for their loved one.
Thank you, Carrie. And would you please explain what is considered mental health illness?
Okay, so mental illnesses are like medical conditions. They disrupt a person's thinking. Okay, it disrupt their mood or their feelings, but it's a different part of the body, right? It's a medical condition disrupts someone's life, but for mental illness, it disrupts their thinking, their mood, their ability to relate to others, their daily functioning. Just as diabetes and a disorder of diabetes, it's a disorder of the pancreas, but the disorder of mental illness is in the brain. And so it affects the brain, it affects the abilities that we normally would see someone have. And so depending on the level of severity of those symptoms, the person may have debilitating factors, the person may have disabling factors. So mental illness is something that can disrupt someone's work or their ability to relate to others, or their daily life skills. Okay.
I'm glad that we are discussing about mental illnesses today, because this is a topic that not a lot of people are familiar with different mental illnesses. So today we are going to have a conversation, and I hope, everybody, after finishing this presentation, most people become familiar with exactly what is a mental illness. How can we recognize the symptoms of a mental illness?
Okay, so sometimes the symptoms, what it might look like to you is that the person doesn't smile or look at you and make eye contact, or the person doesn't laugh at your jokes. And that we call a flat affect, right? So their face might not be reactionary in a normal social way. Or you might see someone who can't sleep, someone who laughs a lot at anything, someone who goes on spending sprees. So you see the behaviors, and maybe even someone that yells a lot and is really, really emotional about things and easily emotional, or breaking things. Maybe they're getting a little bit too much energy in a negative way. And that could be part of mania. Okay, what we call mania, some elevated level of mood. So that's what the person's experiencing. They're experiencing a flat affect. They might be experiencing mania, for example, but those are the things it might look like. And then you have some more severe symptoms of mental health that the person might be experiencing hallucinations. And what that looks like to us is they might be talking to someone who's not really there. We can't see, right? They might be responding to something internal. And then with depression, you might see someone staying in bed all day and unable to get out of bed. They might be crying. They might not be eating well. They might be isolating. And some of these things may seem willful to us. It may seem like they can control it. It may seem like they're making choices that are just bad for them. But internally, this is something we can't see. What's really happening? It's real inside to them. Sometimes it's physically debilitating. Depression has been known to actually make people feel like they can't get out of bed at all.
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges that, and the reason as to why we are having this conversation, because if you have like a physical condition, you can see. Well, when we talking about a mental illness, sometimes, that's totally different.
Visible to us, yes. Mm-hmm. And some other things might be happening, like psychiatrically, what they're experiencing inside are what we call delusions. And what that might look like to us is that they think people are watching them all the time. They might get a little bit paranoid easily, or they might be disorganized in their thoughts and they're saying things that don't make relevant sense. And so that often some of the outcome of that is that they're disorganized and they can't keep a schedule and they can't show up for things on time or be, reliable in that way. And so we may, without knowing what's internally going on with that person, we may make improper judgments about it. It's an invisible thing.
And that's also the reason in here, I just want to clarify that today is just an overview about mental illnesses that we are discussing here. But we're going to put like contact information in the chat and also below this video. So like that, in case if somebody have any question about this topic, you guys have that contact information right there. So Carrie, tell me a little bit more about what are some of the most common mental illnesses that you see out there?
Okay. So most common is depression and anxiety, and those are often coined the common cold of mental illnesses because anyone can experience that, and very, very commonly. And then also, reactions to trauma like post-traumatic stress. So those disorders are pretty common. Okay. They can be, severe and more debilitating, or they can be mild and people can be easily masking them and we may not see the signs. So the things that are less common than that, but more severe, are things like schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder and bipolar disorder. they are less common, but they are often more disabling to the individual when the symptoms are severe. So I don't know if you want me to go into the details of what they are, but those are some of the diagnoses you might hear about, and those are things. Every one of those diagnoses that I mentioned can be mild or severe, and you may see people with different levels of functioning with all those diagnoses.
Yeah. And can you please go over some of the mental illnesses that could be hard to identify, and why is that? I know that you just touched base it in regard to some of them, but we know that sometimes it's hard to identify those illnesses. So if you can please go over a little bit, elaborate.
Okay, so any one of them can be hard to see depending on the person. Like, I think that depression can be building in someone for a long time that we may not know or see the signs of. But when you see some of those outward signs or statements that sound pretty hopeless, that's when you can start to recognize them in the example of depression. But even in the real hardest ones to identify early are the severe ones like schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder, because in the early stages, they can seem like depression, isolation, and withdrawal, and it develops over time. So initially, the families that we see whose loved one have those diagnoses will tell us that in the beginning, we didn't know that they were having hallucinations or delusions. It was really just looking like depression and withdrawal. And because there's some in schizophrenia, there's some symptoms that are outward that we can see later on in the later stages. We can see that somebody's responding to hallucinations. We can tell that they are having delusions. But in the early stages of it, it's something that is what's called a negative symptom, which means it's not something we can see, but it's something that's missing from their behavior. So it looks like depression because they're isolating. They're not going to work. They're not going to school. They're not keeping themselves. They're not taking showers. They're doing a lot of things that seem like it could be depression or something else at first.
And Carrie, how can we approach someone with a mental illness, or how we can support that person,
Well, do you mind if I put a slide up for this question?
You're more than welcome to do so.
Okay. Because a caring approach is something we all try to, actually, I'm not sure if I can get this one. Hold on. Okay. So I'm going to go down to this slide right here and start from here. Hopefully it works for me. I'm sorry about the technology.
Okay. It's okay.
Well, anyway, can everyone see this slide?
Yes.
Okay. So what caring approaches do not sound like is saying to someone, I remember during my breakup, I just threw myself into work. What you should do is, so you're giving advice in that example, right? So you approach someone with an approach that sounds more like, breakups can be tough. It's natural for you to be hurt or upset. So really validating someone if they're struggling with this kind of thing. That's an example of how you can approach them in a more caring way, as opposed to giving advice. That's one thing we want to help families and loved ones and anyone who you're approaching that you care about know that not everyone is looking for you to solve their problems. So one of the best things to do is to just ask them how they're doing and give them support. Another thing that a caring approach does not sound like is you really need to talk to a professional about that. While it's important for us to let them know professionals are available, it's better just to approach it from a way that's a little less judgmental. So we want to say, I'm here for you if you want to talk. there are also people who are trained to talk to you, to work through these feelings, and that would be a better way to approach someone. And then another thing we often say to someone, especially if you don't know, these are early warning signs and they're not showing any other problem and they're just complaining about some hopeless feelings. If you say, don't worry about it, you'll get over it, and try to cheerlead them into being well, and it often tells them that they're not enough and that they can't talk about what's really bothering them. So you're better off to say to someone, you're not alone, I'm here. And if you want to talk, I'll be here, right? And so let's say you notice somebody doing something that's really counterproductive to them. Maybe they're using poor, coping skills that are unhealthy, and you want to help them and approach them in that way. The best thing not to do is not to say what you're doing isn't healthy. A better way to approach them is to say, I care about you and I've noticed you change in this, maybe a mood or behavior or something. This is what I've noticed. And I'm really caring about you. I'm really worried for you. Is there something I can do, right? Rather than telling them and judging the quality of what they're doing. Okay, so those are just some examples. We try to help people change a little bit, tweak their communication, because sometimes it's not what we say, but how we say it, right?
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Course, yeah, and I'm glad that you went over that, because sometimes like you want to be supportive and you want to be there, but probably we don't have the right approach at that moment. So I'm glad that you went over that in detail. So thank you very much.
Sure.
Another thing that I would like to ask you, why do you think some people, despite having a mental illness, do not follow up with a mental health professional? Why is that?
Well, there can be a lot of reasons for that, but a couple of big ones in my mind are stigma being an obstacle. Nearly 2/3 of people with a mental illness do not seek treatment. And we think that's because they might not have insight to what the problem is internally. They might be looking at external factors. Or they might have the lack of knowledge about it. They might be telling themselves it'll go away or it'll get better. Or they just don't want people knowing their business. So there's the fear of disclosing and fear of discrimination if they do, right? So they might be saying, I would lose my job, or my health insurance would drop me. There's all kinds of beliefs that people have. They might be fearing the confidentiality of. And if it's a relationship that they're worried, they're fearing, loss of that relationship or rejection from someone. So really what we're talking about is acceptance from others and then self-acceptance. So self-stigma can be a big obstacle for somebody. Another reason, of course, is access to care is a huge one, especially since this pandemic. There's so many services that caseloads are full, and programs have long waiting lists. So even when somebody overcomes their stigma and overcomes these obstacles that are internal to them or in their surroundings, the access becomes a problem. How do we get the care we need? And there's just, not just in our area, a problem with this, but everywhere there's an access, a shortage of services available.
Hey, Carrie, and let's go over, let's say like if someone suspect of having challenges with their mental health or any mental health illness, what do you think is the first step that that person should take?
Talk to someone they trust. It doesn't necessarily have to be a professional, but open up to some adult that they trust. And if we're talking about parents in this room who are worried about their, young loved ones, if your loved one won't talk to you, encourage them to talk to someone else, anybody they trust, an adult that can, they can open up to. A lot of times I know the parents that I work with are, really fearful that they can't be everything. They can't be the one to get their loved one to open up. But sometimes it's the family so close that they're afraid to open up to them. So ask them who their, trusted person is. Sometimes it's a doctor. Sometimes the first line of talking about depression or others, in mental health interfering is someone's primary care. Primary care physicians often, hear about it first before anyone else. Talk to a mental health professional is obviously another step that somebody can take. Talking to any mental health professional, using hotlines. There are 24-hour hotlines for both adults and teens. And there are WARMLINEs, as you know, through your agency also and ours. The use of self-help drop-in centers is a good way. Somebody needs someone to talk to. There are others who are there to talk to them as peers, peers on a WARMLINE. There's even text lines where someone can, if they're afraid to talk about it. Today, a lot of, especially young people, prefer to text over actually talking about it. But then there's also the use of a psychiatric urgent care that I wanted to take a plug at today. We, in New Jersey, we have gotten a grant in every county to establish early intervention support services is the grant funding name. And what it really is urgent, just as health urgent cares operate, this one operates as a mental health urgent care. And every county now has the grant. It used to be operating in 10 counties up until this year. And in the beginning of 2022, the state offered the communities, every agency, one agency in every county to open one up. And here in Newton, we have one in on Spring Street at our mental health association. So that's another way to get help for yourself. It's a one-stop shopping type of place to get counseling, case management to link you to services, and to get psychiatric prescriptions if needed. So this is funded by the Division of Mental Health and Addiction Services, which does fund individuals over 18. So if you're knowing someone over 18 who needs this, they can drop in anytime. So I know that may put some barriers to some of the people in the audience here who are looking for services for children. But if you have children who are struggling, and of course it doesn't happen alone, family members often need their own care. Caregivers need care too. This is a place you can go if you're in need of talking to someone and getting your own counseling. This is anyone and everyone. It doesn't have to be an adult with a serious mental illness. It could be the first time you're asking for help. This is the place you can go.
Thank you. And I'm glad that we are going over that information. By any chance, Carrie, do you have the contact information in case if somebody would like to get in contact with your agency or one of the resources that you just mentioned?
Yeah. The brochure that I put in the chat it tells you all about our wellness hub. It's the IFSS brochure, and I'll just read you the contact information there. So
while you're doing that, Carrie, I just want to remind everybody that contact information and anything that you need to know in relation to who you need to get in contact with, all that information is going to be right below this video. So in case if you guys don't have time right now to just get that contact information, everything is going to be right below this video when we finish this recording.
Thank you. So Sussex office for the Wellness Hub is 83 Spring Street, Suite 303, and Newton. And the phone number is 973-840-1850. And I put it all in the chat right here. I just copied it. The brochure is, I put in earlier in the chat, but this highlights the contact for that. So and IFSS is also in the chat, the brochure for that, but as I said before, that's for families whose adults have a mental health condition and live in Sussex County. They can reach me at 973-579-4399, extension 402, which I also put in the chat earlier.
I just want to remind everybody also that if you have any questions in relation to services, resources, or you are a caregiver with, children with challenges, you can also reach out to Family Partners. We are 973-940-3194. This is not like a clinical number that you can call, like say if there is an emergency, you know who you need to call, but this is in case if you have any questions about services, resources, or anything. If you are a caregiver with a special needs child, or any questions that you might have about resources, just reach out and we're gonna be able to guide you through to the right resource. So anything else that you would like to go over in here, Carrie, before we finish it?
I just wanted to give everyone, an opportunity to ask me some questions. I hope, I have a lot of experience, but I may not have all the answers to your questions. And I have a lot of experience in working with families and adults. And I'd be happy to get more information for you if there's something that I don't know about. So I'd be happy to start any Q&A if you want.
We are gonna actually move on to the Q&A session. That part is not recorded. So before we conclude this presentation, I just want to formally thank you again for being here with us and to everybody joining us. And like I said before, all the information, contact information, everything is gonna be right below the video. And like I said, if you have any question, please do not hesitate, just reach out to us. So thank you, and we're gonna go to the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you.